introducing you to my online sewing academy here in the studio with me, and I'm going to be showing you how to make this rather fun and super practical reversible tote bag today. And let me tell you why I'm here sharing this tutorial with you today. My online sewing academy is open for enrolment at this very moment in time. We start on the 9th of September, and I wanted to introduce you to how I run the online sewing workshops. So the Academy currently is a 10-week course where we make 5 fantastic projects, starting from complete beginners all the way up to make you super confident to leave the Academy and make your own fabulous things from home, using all the skills and techniques that you've learnt with me over the 10 weeks. And I wanted to introduce you to the studio here and this online environment to show you a little insight of how the workshops are run. Now, typically the workshops and the sewing sessions through the 10 weeks are done on a live basis. So live meaning that we sew together on the internet via a Zoom webinar. This gives you the opportunity to ask questions. It gives me the opportunity to sew at a pace that you can follow and that you can learn in your own way and your own speed. We can also stop, revisit pieces that I've sewn already, ask questions, show you in depth how to do things so you really learn and really take in what the course is offering you. I'm super proud to be able to offer the online workshops. This is something completely new on the market, something specialist to me, and I'm really passionate about doing this for people because I feel that online tutorials need a bit more. People need more. They can't always get to sewing workshops where they live in their hometowns, and my online sewing academy offers that one-on-one connection via the internet. So today I wanted to bring you a little glimpse of how the workshops are run and how I teach. This isn't a live scenario, so not quite the same, but it still gives you an idea to how my teaching can help you and how you could benefit from joining the online academy. So let's get started. So today we're going to be making the reversible tote bag. You need to have your pattern printed out and cut out that I've supplied. So if you haven't got this already, you can find it in the comments below here on this tutorial or via an email if you join me through the academy. So it's a 2-part pattern. You need to print it out and size it to the size of your page A4, and then you need to connect the 2 pieces of the pattern together, and that will give you something looking like this. Now this pattern is cut on the fold. So down here you will see here it says cut on the fold. You need to lay the pattern on your fabric with the folded edge along here to get the effect of your bag when the fabric is opened. You're going to need 2 fabrics to do this project. We have a lining and an outer fabric, although the bag is reversible, so choose 2 gorgeous fabrics that you would love either way. I've chose a grey spot today and this lovely mustard yellow, and this is an old curtain as well. So again, it's a great project for upcycling and to practice your skills. And the main skills we're going to be learning today is cutting out a pattern, following a tutorial, and really mastering our straight stitch and top stitch. And it's a fab little pattern because as you sew it, when you get to the point when you turn it in the right way, you completely think it's not going to be a bag, and then all of a sudden it turns into this amazing bag. So it's a really fun project to see something evolve from fabric into a finished project. So what we're going to need today, we're going to need our fabrics. You're going to need just over ½ metre of each of your chosen fabrics. Of course you can have the 2 same fabrics if you want to. You're going to need your scissors or cutting equipment, so rotary cutter or something, possibly a ruler to help you cut if you're using a rotary cutter, your pattern, your sewing machine, thread to match your fabric, because we will be doing some top stitching at the end, a nice full bobbin, and plenty of pins or clips depending on what you want to use. And that's it. So first of all, we need to cut our pattern out. So grab your fabrics. It doesn't matter which one you start with, and it also doesn't matter if you cut them out right sides facing or wrong sides facing. Just make sure you do it the same for all of your pieces. Now we want to cut on the fold. So we want to make sure that our fabric is folded in half along the long edge so that we can fit our pattern along that folded edge standing upright. So pop your fabric folded on the fold, And to make the best use of your fabric as well, you don't want to fold it completely in half, just fold enough to be able to cut your pattern out of that folded piece of fabric. So I can move it along a bit more, and that just makes the most use of your fabric, because there's lots of little projects we can make with all the leftovers, so it's great to build up a little leftover stash. You don't need to cut any extra seam allowance, that's all included in this pattern for you today. So I'm just going to clip the side on the folded edge. So this is the folded edge of my fabric. I've folded it in half, as you can see, and I've led my pattern on with these arrows pointing against that folded edge right up to the edge there, nice and flush. And then I'm going to pop a couple of pins in as well, just to hold the top up here. Make sure your pattern is facing up the right way for your bag. So obviously this is the handle at the top here. So if you've got a pretty pattern on your fabric, you want it facing up the right way. And then I'm just going to cut that out. And you want 2 of your chosen outer fabric and 2 of your lining fabric or inner fabric. So 4 of these pattern pieces cut out for fabrics all together. So cutting out sometimes is a really tricky stage for people. They find this bit really hard to keep the fabric flat, you know, to get a nice neat cut, especially when following a pattern as well, because the fabric moves as you pick it up. So really top tips for this is try and keep your fabric as flat as you can on your work surface. Try not to pick the fabric up too much as you cut it, to keep it nice and flat and the pattern flat on top of it. If you've got fabric weights, you can use these as well to help you. And this is where a rotary cutter is great, because you don't have to lift your fabric at all. You can apply your ruler down along the edge of the pattern, or freehand if it's a curve, and then you can just cut. So it really does help keep your fabric and pattern, you know, still in one place and get a really fresh cut on your project. But it's not for everyone, so scissors are equally as good. You just need to take a bit more time and make sure you get a nice clean cut around your pattern. And it's super important when cutting out, you know, this makes all the difference to how your finished project is going to look potentially. So take your time, make sure you get it as best you can. So there's one. So if I hold this up, so my pattern was led this way round, so with my arrows along this folded edge. So as you can see, when I now unfold that, that gives me my bag shape. So I need another one of those in that fabric, and then 2 out of my lining fabric. Now on the Academy, we will either cut together on the live session, or I will ask you to cut your pieces before we come on to the live sewing session. It really depends how long I think the session may last on that particular evening. All the sessions are run in the evenings, because that's when I find most people are available to join me, and they run from about 7:30 on various days to give people a chance to join and not miss out. So they tend to be midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday evening. If you can't join a live session to sew with me, it's highly recommended to do that for the interaction and the experience. But if you can't, all the sessions are recorded and shared on email or in our private Facebook group, so you can then rejoin and rewatch at any time that's suitable to you. And you don't have to keep up with the Academy as we run. If you're, you know, you take a bit longer to do your sewing, or you just want a break, or you're away, that's absolutely fine. I will touch base with you regularly to see how you're getting on, but you can watch the tutorials at any time and ask questions at any time as well. We have a private Facebook group that I share everything with you in, and I also sort of come on and do live videos, give help and tips and know-hows, and really support you, and you can share all your projects, you can ask questions. We have little quizzes and things as well along the way every now and again. So it really is interactive, it's a really community feel, it's really nice. You'll probably get to make some new sewing friends, and maybe some sewing friends that live nearby, which would be obviously absolutely lovely. And I'm there to sort of on hand to support you as much as I can. It's my ultimate passion really, to really help and support people. So, you know, it's not my intention at all to start something with people and then just leave them to it and not have that interaction. It's really, for me, the biggest thing about my academy is being there for people, supporting them and helping them understand to do it fully, so they don't feel that they're over their head or they just can't do it. I want everyone to find the passion of sewing like I do myself. So that's the second one cut, and I'm just going to do the linings now. Now it's a really good idea to cut these all separately, so 4 individual cut pattern pieces, just because if you try and do 2 together, because they're on the fold, that's quite a bit of fabric to get through and your fabric's more likely to move. So cut them all out one at a time, so you'll have 4 cut pieces. And like I say, this stage really you sort of want to take your time. Also make sure your fabrics are nice and ironed. Give them a good press before you cut as well, because that makes a big difference also. If you've got creases or folds in your fabric, that's going to affect your overall outcome, and your pattern pieces are not necessarily all going to be the same shape and size. So just consider as well giving your fabric a good press before you begin. So we're almost there. And I'm just doing a mix here of scissors and rotary cutter, just to show you really the difference between the two and how I use them, depending on what you might have at home. And if you do have a rotary cutter or thinking getting one, remember you need a cutting board to cut on. The rotary cutters are very sharp. They're going to cut through anything they touch pretty much, so you need a self-healing board underneath. And they can take a bit of getting used to too, so have a little practice. That's all my pieces cut out ready to use. So I'm going to put my pattern piece aside now because I'm done with that for a moment, and then I'm ready to prepare my sewing fabrics for sewing. Okay, so I've just moved my camera down now. Quite often in the academy you'll see me talking away and not be able to see my head, and that's because I want to give you a bit more view of what we're doing and try and get a bit closer in for you, so you can really understand what I'm doing step by step. So next I want to put my fabrics together ready for sewing. So here are my 4 cut folded pieces. If I open them up, so here's my 2 nice mustard floral ones. These are my right side. So the right side of your fabric is the pretty side that you can see, and the wrong side is the reverse. So I want to put the 2 right sides together, 2 right sides facing on top of each other. So I'm just going to flip that on top of that one, and then what I can see from the outside is the wrong side of my fabric here and the wrong side of my fabric the other side as well. I want to get those fabrics lined up on top of each other, nice and neat and even, and then I'm going to put some pins around there to hold it in place, and that's ready to begin my first sewing. There we are. I've just put 4 pins in, but you can do more if you want to, and you want to do the same with your other 2 fabrics also. So I'm just going to pull one open. Right side is facing me here, so you can see the reverse here, that's the wrong side. and then I want to open my other fabric piece and I'm going to lay that on top so that my two right sides are facing. And again, just pop a few pins just to hold that in place, ready for sewing. Or equally, if you wanted to use clips, fabric clips, you can do that as well. So if you find your pattern pieces are completely different shapes to each other, give them a trim now to the smallest one so they're nice and even. And our first sewing stage is we're basically going to sew from this top curved corner here. We're going to sew down one side, along the bottom and up the other side. We're not going to touch any of this handle stage at this point, just down the side, along the bottom and up the other side on both of our pieces. A straight stitch, do a back stitch when you begin, a back stitch when you finish on each of them. And what you also want to do, seam allowance wise, there's not a set seam allowance when we're sewing this. So a seam allowance is the distance from the edge of your fabric to your stitch line. We're just going to follow the edge of our sewing machine foot as we do this. Gives us a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and it's just nice and easy to follow. And we can follow this throughout the making of our bag. So I'm going to take you to my sewing machine now, and I'm going to sew around these two pieces and then we'll come back for step 2. Okay, so we're here at the sewing machine now. I'm going to sew around these two bag pieces. I'm just going to make sure that I've got a thread that I'm happy to use on these fabrics. They're cotton fabrics, so I'm just going to use my ordinary polyester thread on these. Will be absolutely fine. And I use a Gutermann thread. It's a brilliant brand. I probably wouldn't use much else. And again, it does make quite a big difference what thread you use in your machine. If you buy the cheaper versions, you may struggle sometimes. You may be okay, but it's worth investing in a good quality thread. So think about the colour as well. Make sure you've got a nice full bobbin in there so we don't run out. So I'm going to get my first bag piece and just follow down this side edge along the bottom and up the other side. So I'm using an ordinary straight stitch here, and like I said, I'm going to follow the edge of my sewing machine foot. So the edge of my sewing machine foot, the inside edge here, I'm going to lay the edge of my fabric against that, and that will just give me a guide as I'm sewing down my fabric. I'm going to make sure my fabric stays nice and flat on top of each other, and as I sew I'm going to take my pins out. I do not want to be sewing over those. And start my sewing with a little back stitch. With the live sewing sessions that we would do in the Academy online, you have opportunity now to ask questions. You could ask me to show you something again, just double check what you're doing is correct. Show me what you're doing on the screen as well, which really helps, and make sure you know, you're following the process as you need to, and you're going to end up with your finished product looking beautiful. When you get to the corner here, you want to stop centimetre away from the bottom, keep your needle down in your fabric, lift your foot up and spin your fabric round, and that gets a nice clean line of stitching. Centimetre from the end, needle down, lift your foot and spin around. Almost to the end. And then when I get to this top corner, I'm just going to do a back stitch to finish off. There you are, that's one done. So I've now stitched around the 4 edges that I wanted to do. So that's down this edge here, the right hand edge, along the bottom and then up the other side. So that's one done. I'm going to put that back on my work surface. And I'm just going to do the same to my other piece. Taking on this one my clips out as I go. Back stitch when I finish and back stitch when I end. And I'm still following the edge of my sewing machine foot along the edge of my fabric. you use it on potentially every single project that you make. So it's great to really practice this. Get used to the stitching, what stitch length works best for your machine, what tension you might need for different fabrics, and you learn that really from sort of testing and having a go. And if you're using a different fabric from time to time, it's always worth doing a little test patch on a piece of that particular fabric before you begin sewing your project. So if you're using something a bit thicker or a bit lightweight, just give a little sew on a scrap piece of that fabric before you begin, just to check your stitching and your tension and everything is correct. There we go, there's that one done as well. So that's my 2 bag pieces now sewn around those 3 edges. I'm just going to take you back to the sewing table and show you step 2. Come on over. Okay, so we're back here now at the sewing table and we're on to step 2. We've sewn down our sides along the bottom of both of our sides of our bag. We're going to turn one of these bag pieces in the right way now so that we can see the pretty side. I'm going to do this for my lining piece. And then we're going to leave the other piece the wrong way out so we can see the reverse of our fabric, the not so pretty side. And we're going to put this one that we've turned in the right way inside of this side of the bag that's the wrong way out. So we're just going to slide that inside. It doesn't really matter which one you turn in the right way or wrong way at this stage, because the bag's reversible, it's all going to end up the same at the end. So put one inside the other. And you want to get it right to those top corners there. So it's good to put your hands in, let the fabrics fall down on themselves, and you want to grab it at the top then, when both the fabric inside is right to the very top, and pop a couple of pins to hold that fabric all the way up there. So make sure you get it right to the top, to that seam line, and pop a pin in there to hold that and stop the bag lining slip down. So I'm just going to put my hand back in, get it right to the top, and pop a pin. And I've just popped 2 pins in there along the top to hold that lining fabric in place. And then lay your bag out and get it nice and flat, so the lining inside of the outer bag here. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to sew around our handle pieces. So we now want to put some pins around all these top edges ready for sewing. So first of all, I'm going to pop some pins at these 2 side seams. So on the inside of my bag, the side seam here, I'm just going to open that seam up, that seam allowance, so it's nice and flat. And I'm going to do the same the other side as well. You don't need to iron it at this point. Just open that seam up and pop a pin in there. And do the same for the other side. So I'm just going to get those 2 seams, make sure they're lined up either side, open those seams up. Now if your bag isn't lining up and laying flat at this point, it may be that your seam allowances, you've sewn slightly different sizes. So one is maybe slightly bigger or smaller than the other. So if that's the case, if it's not much, don't worry, just sort of lay it as flat as you can. If you notice there's quite a big difference, to say the lining fabric is a lot smaller than the outside fabric, you're going to need to take your seams in on the one that's slightly bigger a little bit more before we stitch round. But hopefully that's not the case if you've managed to follow your 1 centimetre, the edge of your sewing machine foot all the way around. I'm also going to put some pins now at the top of my handles. And just a few pins around each of the curves. And now all I'm pinning are the 2 sections, 2 fabrics together, like so. So I can see inside my bag. I'm not pinning all of the pieces together, just the outside and the inner fabrics together. So I'm going to put some pins at the top of the bag handles, and then some just around the bend here to hold that in place. I'm just going to put 3 along there, and I'm using pins here. And then I'm going to turn it over and do the same the other side, keeping your bag nice and flat so you can see how it's lying. Now, if you find also that one of your fabrics is completely different shape than the other, just give it a little trim down at this point so that it doesn't affect your sewing in a moment. So you might want to for instance, on here, on my little curve here, my lining fabric is just poking out, so I could just trim that down slightly if I wanted to, just to bring that more in line with my outside fabric. It's not too far off in my case, so I'm just going to leave it be. Let's pop some more pins. You can also sort of ease that down a bit as you pin around to join them up, make them more level. There we go. So you also notice at the top of my handles, I've laid my pins horizontally like this. So I've led them running across ways, and I've led them or pinned them quite far down from the top of my bag handles. And there's a reason for that. I want to leave the top pieces of my bag handles unsewn on each of my bag handles, so 4 handles. And I want to start sewing 2 inches down from the top here, and then I want to sew all the way around, coming up to 2 inches to the top of the other handle. So I've popped a pin in there just to remind me not to sew any further. That's just my little guide. So you want to make sure you leave a 2-inch gap open at the top of each of your 4 handle parts. We don't want to sew that. We want that piece to stay open, flap open like so. So our next stage now is to sew what I call the 4 U's. So we want to sew from 2 inches down, we want to sew this U here up to the other handle, spin it round and do the side U, then the back U, and then the other side U. So there's 4 there we want to sew. We just want to take our time around the bends and get a nice clean curve on our sewing machine. We want to follow that 1 centimetre seam allowance, so following the edge of the fabric along the edge of our sewing machine foot. And that's step 2. Let's go over to the sewing machine. Okay, so back at sewing machine now, and I'm going to sew around these 4 U's. And just really sort of also say, you know, the great thing about the Online Sewing Academy and the online courses is at any point you can stop me and ask me to show you something again. And you'll quite often see, like here, you can't see my head when I'm talking because I like to be able to zoom in and show you what we're sewing as well. So I'll keep moving the camera up and down in the Academy, hello, as I talk to really help you see what I'm sewing. So you won't necessarily just be watching me talking, I'll be talking while I'm guiding you through your sewing. So we want to now start sewing our 4 U's. I'm starting at the top of any one of my handles, it doesn't matter, following the edge of the inside of my handle to the inside of my sewing machine foot, and that gives me my 1 centimetre. Starting 2 inches down from the top, I'm going to do a back stitch when I begin and a back stitch when I finish. And again in the Academy, if there's a part like this, for instance, and you want to get closer on or you want to ask a question, you can equally do that at any time. So you can stop me, ask me a question, ask me to show you something again, and you know, to make sure you're learning as you need to learn through the course. And there's no pressure to keep up with me sewing as well. There's no pressure to do your sewing at any speed. All of the sessions are recorded, so if you don't finish in the 2-hour sewing sessions that we have, you can just re-watch on replay. They're all recorded and shared in our private Facebook group or sent to you via email, so you can just re-watch at your own time. You can catch up at any time, so if you can't join the live sewing sessions also, you can just re-catch up at another time to suit you. That top one now, so I'm stopping where my pin is, that's my guide, back stitch, and then I'm going to do the next U. So the Online Academy in any of my online courses has its own private Facebook group, and in that Facebook group we share how we're getting on. I share with you things you might need to know, I prep you ready for the week ahead, what we might be sewing, when we might be sewing it, where to find me. I also prep you on what you might need to prepare before coming to the live sessions. And I drop on with live videos, sewing know-hows, we talk about fabrics, we share what fabric we're using in our projects, all sorts of things. It's a lovely community feel. You get to know the people that you're sewing with, you get to have some chat between you, in between sewing classes. So it's a really nice environment to also learn and grow with other people, like-minded people. But it's not all on Facebook. Facebook, you will get a weekly email as well telling you all that information, telling you where to find me, with all the links in that you might need to join the sewing sessions as well. So I'm just moving on to my third U now. So as I sew each part of the projects that we're doing, you know, I potentially may be slightly quicker than you guys, possibly, but what will happen is I will sew up the section I've explained. You can watch along, you can start sewing as you watch, it's entirely up to you, and then as I finish I will watch and see how everybody's getting on. So I will check in with people. If they need a hand with something, I will help them. If they need a question answered, I will do it at that point. So I will just hang on and wait for you. There's no rush at all. I like everybody to take their time and do it at their own pace so they can learn at their own speed. There we go. 2 more to go, or 1 more to go, or 2 more to go, 1 more to go. So when we start the Academy and all of my online courses, I always begin with a complete refresh, or, you know, a start for complete beginners even. So we start the first week looking at our machines, going over the basics, having a play and a practice on our machines, threading them up, changing the needle, winding the bobbins up, talking about threads and fabrics. We also give our machines a little bit of TLC. So we give them a nice clean, we do that together on a live video, so you may have never done that before. So there's little things that you're going to pick up, and even if you're already an efficient sewer and don't feel you need the starter bit, that's all my 4 U's done now, it's still worth joining in the beginners week because it'll give you sort of top tips and things that you may not have known before. We get to meet everybody and say our hellos and welcomes, and it's just fun to sort of have a little play around on our machines, see what machines everybody else is going to be sewing on as well, discuss them. We might want to get sort of recommendations from people, what they think about their machines. So it's a really nice time to meet everybody else on the course before we start sewing. So if you are a complete beginner, don't fret, you can still join. We go through all of that in week 1 and make sure you're completely happy before we start our first sewing project. So that's my 4 U's now sewn. I'm going to head back to the sewing table now and show you the next step. Come on over. So I'm just going to angle you down onto my work surface now, and I'm just going to trim off all my loose threads. So it's really important to keep your work tidy. All these loose threads are potentials for getting wound up in your machine as you do further sewing, causing your machine to get all sort of tied up and the bobbin caught, or all sorts of things happening. So tidy them up, cut them off as you go. So the next stage, we're moving on to the next stage. You could take these pins out of your bag now. First of all, we are going to get ready to turn it in the right way, which is very exciting. But first of all, we're just going to snip around these little curves here. So on each of the curved areas that we've sewn, what we now want to do is snip around, cut some notches into the curved area, right up to our stitch line, as close as you can get. And what this does is when we turn our bag in the right way, it just helps those curves lay nice and flat. So what you want to do is snip right up to your stitch line, as close as you're brave enough to do. If you do have an accident and accidentally snip through your stitch line, don't panic, you haven't spoilt your work. You can just re-sew over the section that you've accidentally cut. And if you do that, if you do need to do that, remember to do a back stitch when you start and finish again. So just watch your materials underneath. You don't want to snip through them accidentally either. So I'm just snipping all the way around here now. And I'm going to do that on the front and back, and also these little side sections too. You don't need to go all the way up your handles, it's just around the curve. There we go. Just snip it all the way around. You could trim off any of the excess fabric you might have. Hopefully you haven't got too much if we've been following that 1 centimetre seam allowance. And then we're ready to turn our bag in the right way. So this is can potentially be the trickiest bit to do. So you want to get one of your handle sections, open it at the top, and you're going to pull your whole bag through that one handle section, which seems pretty crazy, I know, but it does work. Believe me, trust me, this does work. So you put it all the way through that one handle section. So it takes a bit of time. Just take your time. You don't want to, you know, rip your side seams of your handle that you've just sewn beautifully. So just ease it through. And a little sort of tip is to hold the fabric down like this and pull your handle over it. Open your handle at the top, get some of that fabric out and pull that through. There we go, pull it through. You can twist your fabric down as you go to help it get through, and you want all of that fabric to go up into that handle section. All of a sudden it will appear. It's just this initial bit that takes a bit of time, so just ease it down gently. Ease that handle down over your fabric bag, pulling the top open as you go. There we go, you can hear it coming through now easier. So once you've got the bulk of it through, you can then kind of pull the rest of it through. Here it all comes. So that'll be your lining and your outer. Then you need to find the little gaps in the top for each one of your handles. So again, get your fingers in and try and pull that through best you can. And on the other side, there should be some little holes in the top for your handles. So this is when it all starts looking quite exciting, when you see all this come through. There we are, pull the handles through. And then you want to put your lining inside of your bag, or whichever way you want to have your bag sat to start with. Give it a little shake. So put your lining inside now. Get that pressed right down or pushed right down to the corners of your bag. Push those corners out with your finger. I wouldn't use your scissors to push out corners in case you accidentally bust through. So there's no gaps in this bag to push these corners out. You just need to do it with, ease them out with your fingers. Get your hand in, push your lining out so it's all nice and flat. Give it a good shake. Get those handles out. And now is the time to give it a really good press. So those snips we've done, that's what's helping these curves lie nice and flat now and not wrinkle up too much. So hopefully that's the case on your bag. So now what we want to do is give this bag a really good press. And it's really important to do this stage because it really helps us when we finish our bag off. It keeps it looking nice and neat. And it's this seam here around these edges that you want to give particular attention to when you're pressing. You want these to be laying nice and flat, and you want to, you know, make sure that your lining is pressed inside and your outer bag fabric is pressed on the outside. You don't really want to see you know, the fabric sort of curling up on itself when you're doing your top stitching. So that's why it's really important now to press. So press all the bag down now at this stage, and then we're going to join these top handles up. I'm not going to press mine while I'm doing the video here with you today to save us time, but just make sure you go and do that now. So pause the video and go and press your bag. So once you've pressed your bag and you've come back to your work surface, what you want to do is lay it down. It's going to be all nice and flat. You're going to see then, you know, your bag in its true finished state. So when you come back from the ironing board, what you want to do is lay your bag nice and flat, and you just want to check that your handles are the same length at the top. So if some of your handles are shorter, like mine is here, than the other, you want to trim them down. You want them to all be the same length at the top of your bag. So just give them a trim if you need to. In fact, mine aren't too bad. I'm just going to give them a little trim just to make sure they are the same length. So I'm going to make sure my handles are laying nice and flat, and then just give them a little trim with my rotary cutter along the top there. They're actually not too bad. And then we're going to join these handles together now. So here's what we're going to do that. You need to grab one side of your bag, so the two handles opposite each other, and we want to peel back the outer fabrics. So we've left that gap at the top, so peel them back out the way. You've got your two lining fabrics that are facing each other, so right sides facing, and that's how you want them to lie. You want to then open those handles up. You want to then open those handle fabrics up, make sure the top is laid nice and flat against each other, the raw edges, and pop a pin in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch straight across that top section. And we're going to do the same on the other side of the bag. So grab your handle, peel back the outer fabrics like so, get the two lining fabrics right sides facing, line them up along the top, pop a pin in, and then we're going to stitch across the top of those bag handles. So we're not going to stitch in these fabrics, these are out the way, just going to stitch in the lining fabrics at the moment. So let's go back to the sewing machine and I'll show you what we're doing there. Okay, so back at the sewing machine now, we're going to stitch these top sections of our handle across. So just make sure they lay nice and flat. They're going to want to curl in because we've already done these seams down here. So make sure they lay out nice and flat, and you've got the top of them nice and level as well. And then you're just going to do a straight stitch straight across those handles. We're following the top edge of our handle to the edge of our sewing machine foot. Back stitch when we start and a back stitch when we finish. That on each of your bag handles. That's one, and the other one that we've got pinned as well. So again, make sure they're laying nice and flat on top of each other. Straight across the top, like so. Okay, so I've now stitched those together, and I've done both of my handles like that. So now we need to do these outside pieces of fabrics, the piece we flapped down. So you could trim off your threads if you want to at this point, get them out the way. And then you want to get your two outside fabrics, and we need to turn them so that they are right sides facing. So the right side of these fabric is in the outside. So what we need to do is get those two pieces of fabric, and we need to twist them round so that we can get the two right sides of those fabric facing. So this is a bit trickier because it's twisting the fabric on itself. You then want to line up the top raw edges of those fabrics so they're nice and flat, and pop a pin in there. And then we want to do exactly the same, stitch across there following our 1 centimetre seam allowance. And you want to do the same on the other side as well. So grab your two outside fabrics. You want to twist them around so they turn around to be right sides facing. Line them up on top of each other, nice and flat and level. Pop a pin in and stitch across. Do your back stitch when you start and finish again. And we want to do both of those, and taking your pins out as you go. So just make sure as you put this under the sewing machine that it stays nice and flat on top of each other. This is the trickiest bit to keep flat because it wants to twist back on itself. So just take time to lay that nice and flat. And it's also, this is equally important why we've left that 2-inch gap at the top of each of our handles. If you leave too less, then you're not going to have enough room to lay these out nice and flat. There we go. So I'm going to trim off all these loose threads now, but that's all my handles sewn up. So if I now pull my handle apart, you'll see now my handle on the top is stitched together and my handle underneath. So that gives me my 2 stitched together straps of my bag. So what we're going to do now is trim off our threads and go to our ironing board and iron these seams nice and flat now, ready for top stitching. What you want to have achieved is when you pull your handle nice and straight like this, that these 2 fabrics will lay parallel on top of each other, so that you can sew straight across them without any sort of ruffles or extra fabric. If you find that one of them has got extra fabric and there's a bit of a gap, you might need to take this seam in a little bit more on the one that's slightly bigger to make them a bit more even. Okay, and if at any point for a live sewing there's a question that you've got or something you don't understand, you have the opportunity to stop me, ask me to show you again, ask me to explain again. And that's the great thing about sewing live on a webinar. So let's head back to the sewing table, get to your ironing board as well, get that heated up, ready to press these seams nice and flat. Okay, so we're back at the sewing table here. First of all, I'm going to trim these threads off, get rid of all of them, we don't want them hanging about. Like so. And then at the iron, what you want to do on here is we want to get rid of these raw edges where these 2 sides of our bag handles are open. So you want to fold them fold them in to your handle, and you want to give it a good press along there to keep that nice and flat. And then once you've done that, you then want to put some pins or clips along there to close that gap up. And that just, the ironing makes it much easier for when you're top stitching. It keeps it exactly where you want it to be, and the pins obviously hold it in place before you stitch it. And you want to do that on both sides of your handle, on each of your handles. Yeah. So you want to press yours as you're doing this. I'm just saving time on the video here, so I'm not using my iron, but you definitely want to do this when you're doing yours. So you can give your bag another press all the way around just to make sure your seams are ready for top stitching. That's one handle done there. I'm just going to do the same on the other. So as you can see here, all my raw edges are poking out, so I want to fold those under to be in line with the rest of my bag handle. Give that a good press and pop some pins or clips in there to hold that down. Plenty to hold it down shut. So 2 or 3 pins or clips. And the same the other side here. So that raw edge, tuck that in, get rid of any threads that are overhanging. Give it a good press. And get some pins in there. And then we're moving on to our final step of sewing to complete our reversible tote bag, which is very exciting. So there we go, there's my 2 bag handles all pinned up, the gaps ready for sewing. I'm going to start sewing on the top of one of my handles, either side, it doesn't matter again. I'm going to start sewing on one side of the open point so that I sew straight over an open edge, so the first one is closed straight away and go round, and I've got the 2 handle sections to top stitch, and then I've got the main bit in the middle to top stitch as well. So a little point to think about here, this is the final stage of our bag. Okay, so I'm back at the sewing machine now, and I've zoomed right into my sewing machine, and I'm going to show you how to do the top stitching. Now, your machine, you might be able to, mine pulls off really hard, pull off this little side table so you've got a nice narrow arm here. And this really helps when doing the top stitching around a bag handle, because you can slide your bag handle over your sewing machine and it helps you go around there nice and easy. If you haven't got that, it doesn't matter. You would just lay your bag handle on top of your sewing machine to stitch around. You just need to be careful of the fabric that's led underneath and don't sew through it all. So I'm going to start at the top of one of my handles. It doesn't matter which one you're starting at. I'm going to make sure my seams are nice and flat. Hopefully yours will, because you've pressed them. And I'm going to start the other side of one of my openings where my pins are, so that I straight away close up one of those openings at the very start. Now when you're top stitching, we're not following the edge of our fabric to the edge of our sewing machine foot, because that would take our stitching too far in. We want to top stitch right near the edge of our fabric, right near the edge of our seam here. So you need to use your eye to follow you along the edge of your fabric best you can. So take your time, go slow, and just stop if you need to. When you get to the piece of the strap where you're sewing over the open edge that you want to close, just make sure you're catching the top and the bottom fabrics, and make sure they're staying folded in neatly as you've pressed them. Take your pins or clips out as you go and pull your fabric nice and taut as you go over those sections. And then just keep going all the way around your bag. Okay, so I've done the two handle top stitching. I'm now going to go around at the inside bit. So again, starting at the top here where my handle is open and stitching around. Back stitch when I begin, of course. And just following this round nice and slowly. Now, it's quite common when you get to the end of a project that you can see the end in sight, and you're like, oh, I want to get this finished, and you rush the last bits. And that can sometimes lead to things getting tangled on your machine, or your threads getting caught, or whatever it is. So just take your time at these final stages. Don't rush your work. Make sure that you use this final step just like you have followed along the rest of your project leading up to it, because this can make and break what your project looks like at the end. And it's quite a good idea, in fact, when you get to that last stage, just to have a break before you start it. So when you get to the last piece of your project, it's worth stopping, going and having a drink or sit down, or even putting it away and restarting it again another evening, so that you're fresh. You're going to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. You're not tired. You're not speedily trying to finish that and get to the end of your project. And the great thing about the live online sewing academy is you can do exactly that. If you join me live and you don't want to finish, or you've got to your point where you've just had enough and you need to stop, you can leave the live sewing session, you can just watch the final stage, and you can come back to those sessions and resume whenever you want to, re-watch them, finish off where, start back off where you finished. It entirely works to you and your pace. Bit now, so I'm coming back round to where I started, sealed up my gap. There we go. I'm going to trim off all my threads. You can give it another press now if you want to, and your bag should now be complete, and you can marvel at your work and enjoy using your project time and time again. So ta-da! Your bag is finished. It should be looking amazing. Trim off all the threads. Make sure you're completely happy with everything you've done on there. but it's ready to use. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, and let's give you a bit of an insight to what the Academy is like online and reassured you that it really works at your pace and for you. Everything's recorded, so you can watch everything time and time again. You can re-watch, you can sort of zoom in if you want to, ask me questions. It really works around you and your pace and your sewing experience. I would love to have you on the Academy and make with me the 5 wonderful projects that we're lined up to make. And they include the gorgeous trail tote bag, which let me show you, which is a shoulder tote bag. We learned to put a zip in here. We learned to add a slip pocket inside. We do piping around the edge of our bag here. We make a beautiful handle as well. We also make a crossbody apron on the Academy. We make a little zipper pouch. So again, we're learning zips along the way a few different times. We make, oh, let me just grab them. We make some beautiful cushion covers. So again, we learn piping again to make the beautiful cushion cover. We make an envelope back one and one with button closure too. And we also learn to put a zip in our cushions as well, concealed zip. So many beautiful things that we get our hands on and get a chance to make in the Academy, and all really usable things as well. Things we can use in our sewing, we can use at home, we can use out and about, or we can make to gift, or maybe you're thinking of setting up a handmade business yourself and would like to get some experience and some ideas. The Academy is perfect for everybody who is just starting out, whether you've been sewing a little while already and want to refresh your skills, or whether you just want to actually make something from start to finish. Because again, quite often we'll start projects and never get them finished. So I give you the incentive, I give you the inspiration and the motivation to get sewing and complete your projects from start to finish. I hope you will join me. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to message me. The Academy for September start is open now. Enrolment is open now, only this week, and then it closes, ready for our September start on the 9th of September. And we're going to be making some incredible projects leading up to Christmas over 10 weeks together online. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed that, and any questions, pop me a message. See you soon. Bye.